4, 3, 2, 1. I think we're live. Yes, we are. I think.
Greetings.
Yes, we are. I think.
Greetings.
So, again, thanks everybody for joining us on another episode. Again, thanks everybody for joining us on another episode. Sorry, there's feedback. Let's try that again. Thanks everybody for joining us on another episode of Torogi Talk. I know we didn't do one last week, but I was just so busy. I think for this one, just given the situation, especially in the States, and I mean, the whole world is really coming together and starting to support it. Yeah, we thought we might as well jump on the whole racism, discrimination, debate. I guess it's not really a debate, but just talk. So first, I think we'll just talk about, what's going on in general, and at least what we've seen. And then we're going to move on to experiences that, Igorots, maybe we have some personal stories. I'm not sure I personally have any, but I think some of these guys do. Maybe some stories about discrimination against Igorots. I know we started, or we had talked about it last, I think in the very first talk, our pilot episode, briefly.
Yeah.
But we didn't really flesh it out too much. So we'll just go into that and kind of relate that back to, what's going on in the world today. So let's go right into introductions again. So I'm Gerald, and I'm part of the BBUC Vancouver group, BBUC BC group here in Canada. And my parents are from Mountain Province, Apayao, and Benguet. Mark, I'll let you go this time.
Hey, my name is Mark Watan, Sapat and Watan, and I'm from the BBUC of Northern California in the United States, but I'm residing in the UK, and so I'm a part of the Igorot UK out over here. And my family is from the Mountain Province in the areas of Tajan, and also, well, they ended up moving down, and I guess we can be considered Bago people. And this is my daughter saying hello and saying goodnight. It's really late here in London. But yeah, they moved down to the La Union area in the mountains of San Gabriel, and so that's where they reside at the moment. Well, my parents live in the States. Anyways, okay, I'll pass it to Idol.
I'm Idol Matthias, also from BBUC of BC, like Gerald. My parents are from Benguet. That's it. Go ahead, Jay.
Hey, thanks, Idol. Jay Watan, reside in San Francisco, a member of BBUC Northern California. Same story as Mark. Parents now live in the United States, actually. So looking forward to talking story today.
Nice. Thanks, everyone. Excuse me. Yeah, so actually the only one that currently lives in the States right now is Jay. Just wondering, maybe you can start this off with what's going on, or at least in your area, and what are you seeing? Yeah, because last time we talked, I think it wasn't too bad. I'm just curious about if any of the protests or anything has picked up around your area.
Well, what you see in the media is a whole lot of protesting, and it's still, some of it looks kind of crazy, because that, of course, that's what the media would really focus on. For the most part, my observation is a lot of people have taken to marching in the streets and trying to engage in some sort of like conversation or public demonstration that says that advocating for Black Lives Matter, advocating for racial justice, advocating for really for us in America and perhaps around the world to think in different ways. For racism to exist, it requires power, privilege, and prejudice. Those are the three elements that need for it to exist. And most isms that do exist that creates a disparity between one person and another requires some formula of power, privilege, and prejudice. And so in the United States, the conversation about race has been always a difficult one, a very sensitive one. It's almost as if people don't want to see themselves as the bad guys. It's as if this whole movement has said that, hey, a good portion of America, you're really the empire. You're not the rebellion like in Star Wars. You're the other guys. You're Vader and Palpatine in the original trilogies. And so it always comes as a paradigm shift, the shock when people hear that. These are necessary conversations, but at the same time, we also need to strive for truth telling and a way to move forward in terms of healing. It requires a lot of listening for those who are in the position who have positions of power. Now, power is a weird thing because it's not the same in every context. And given a context, like, for example, being, Igorot amongst Filipinos, where's the power? Sometimes it varies. If we're the one teaching the dances, then, we got a little bit of power there. But a lot of times, it goes back to these old weird narratives about like, hey, aren't you the people with tails? And why are you so light-skinned? I thought you guys were all dark. I'm like, oh my gosh, we are so diverse as a people. And so these are questions then about recognizing people's dignity and recognizing people for who God created them to be. And that's a hard thing because I think that people naturally need to categorize things. It helps people make sense of the world. And we do this in many ways unconsciously. Now, the danger, of course, is when it begins to describe a person as less than human or less than what value people less than what they are. So I see these conversations happening in the United States. I serve in the church, so I see this. I serve in the United States Army, so I see this conversation happen in different ways. In this COVID time, you can't really meet with people, but you just see so many things happening, and people are definitely trying to participate in a way to advocate for change. Now, I think what's wacky is that when young people say stuff like, wow, this is the first time in the whole world, history of the world, that something like this has happened. No, that's not true. This has happened a lot of times throughout the history of the world. There have been times when people come to the tipping point of gaining a new consciousness. It's almost like, a moment of deep spiritual revelation. And these are one of those moments, and it seems that it coincides. I think the fact that it coincides with coronavirus, that's no coincidence. In fact, coronavirus helped this conversation because it's given people opportunity to be more reflective. And most people are not comfortable with the silence and the isolation of what this COVID has brought. So now that there's an opportunity to have something where you could literally fight against. It has brought together a certain reflective consciousness in people to say, hey, yeah, these things are really wrong. Racism is wrong. How we treated Black and brown people, well, we need to evaluate that. The powers that are given to police officers, we need to think about, what it means, to have police who protect and serve, and what their roles are so that they could truly be people of the community. And so all these conversations are happening right now at the same time, and we have space for it because, well, most of us are sheltering in place, kind of, sort of. There's now a spike over here in the United States and in many of our regions now because of this, but it's opening up places for people to be challenged with conversation, to confront what sometimes we call what a lot of like progressive folks would say is like the unconscious biases. But really, it's just growing in awareness. I mean, these are just fancy academic words that really say, yeah, it's just helping us grow in the awareness of who we are, how we're truly interconnected. But anyways, what I find is that it's opening up a lot of conversation. And these aren't new conversations, but I think more people are able to engage it. And being triggered by what happened to George Floyd and how awful that was. You're watching essentially a lynching, something that you see this video and it's lasting like 9 minutes of a person whose breath is slowly being taken away from them.
Crazy.
And that's different than a gunshot. Gunshot very fast. And that's awful too. But when you see that happening and just how, wow, the dude over there who's standing over him, putting his hand in his pocket, looking like he was like God and stuff, like, dude, that's not right. And people see this and they're yearning for justice. Now, we sometimes can fall into the mistake of thinking that justice is like revenge and retribution. I think that we definitely kind of like sometimes mix that up. But justice is really truly about a restoration of who we are together, a restoration of of trying to make peace with the wholeness of who we are and accepting who others are. And these are all challenging things. This requires a lot of kind of honest conversation. And so for me, I'm really, really interested to see how ready and willing our people are to get into it. Because right now, it's kind of like it looks like it's the thing to do. But sometimes when the conversation gets really hard, because that requires you have to look inside yourself now. That can be And it's easy because you see people pointing. Yeah, hey, that dude's the more racist. That's super. You can see the finger pointing happening. But you have to look in here, and this is where the true healing will happen. This is where the openness will happen, but that's work. That's really work. If we can look beyond the skin, that's outside, and look to who we are inside, we will get somewhere. So, anyways, I find it really like that. I think there's a lot of good things that are happening if we look for it. That's what I've noticed in America, and the voices of people who have generally been marginalized or ignored, or are at least being listened to. And so, for those people who recognize that they are in a position of power, this is the time to listen. This is the time to pay attention. This is the time to just shut up and just lend your ear out there. And in that, when we learn the stories of other people, I truly believe this. When we learn the stories of other people in real meaningful ways, we develop a way to care for them. We develop a way to care, and hopefully that translates into systemic. But I always believe that the only way to deal with the systemic stuff outside of the legislature is you got to work on the individual's heart. And when you start working on that, then you're helping people become healthy. You're helping people become light to the world. But it all starts with us. So anyways, that's what I'm observing in America. How about you guys?
Well, it's interesting because even before all this, as Canadians, we always hear about stories in the States of all of these issues. Personally, I didn't see a lot myself, but especially now, I'm still hearing a lot of stories where, it's definitely present for sure, and I guess it's a good thing that it's becoming mainstream for everybody to know that here. But yeah, even in terms of like protests and everything, I didn't even know we had one. I think when we were talking the other week, they were having one that day.
Yeah.
So, I didn't even know, but just personally, it is nice to see that people are becoming more aware, and now it's people have kind of some motivation to do something about it and at least speak up and create both awareness, and people can start thinking about it more. So yeah, I don't know if the same it's the same experience for you, Idol, but that's what I thought.
Yeah, I knew there was like a huge protest happening, and a couple of my friends were there. A couple of my friends actually took photos there as well of the event and whatnot. my main thought of that was just like, whatever happened to social distancing?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And
I had the same thought.
right. But I don't know of any like actual COVID cases being related to it. But I don't know at this point. I don't even trust the news anymore. But it's interesting because like most of the Canadian perspectives regarding this has always been the vocal voice has always been like of support from what I've experienced. And there's always this notion, and it's been like pretty widely circulated, in how there's like kind of not a backlash, but like a pushback against the whole idea of Canadians being nice and being exempt from all this racism that Americans experience. But there's a very popular opinion of like, no, that's not obviously the case, and which is true, right? Like, this whole podcast is about like, part of it is today talking about like our experiences of discrimination and whatnot. We'll talk about that later. But there's actually a special, like, what happened just today, I think, was there's a shooting by New Brunswick police, or New Brunswick RCMP, I think, of somebody. And then just this past week, there were a bunch of like people calling out cops, like Canadian cops, and a big one being like a First Nations chief that was assaulted by police. So definitely, from what I can tell from Canada, is that like there's a lot of people here that are definitely in support of BLM and like the whole protest and stuff. And I don't know if I mentioned it in our last podcast. I was like totally against rioting and whatnot, or I was conflicted about it, and I still kind of am, because I do not condone in rioting. I don't condone in looting, but at the same time, it's been basically like hammered towards me, or it's been hammered like the reason why this is happening. The reason why the riots in '92 were happening with Rodney King was because there's a lot of frustration, right?
Yeah.
So there's that aspect. So again, because and I think we were all in agreement on this, just because, especially because we're not of African American descent, like, I personally feel that I don't really have an opinion, or I shouldn't have an opinion on whether or not something is right or wrong based on their experience. But just, I can only speak from my experience and what I can see and whatnot, right? But yeah, it's definitely like a tough issue, because like I'm sure all of us has experienced some form of discrimination. I mean, like, honestly, I can't even think of anything either, Gerald. But like, if I really had to dig back, I mean, I could think of experiences. But I personally don't put it into a lens where it's like, oh, I'm such a victim and whatnot. But yeah, that's neither here nor there. What you, Mark?
Oh, me? Yeah. Well, I'm from the state originally, so yeah, I've experienced racism from all kinds of folks, though. Because when we're from San Francisco, it's more like inner city, it's urban, so you experience it from all ends, and sometimes the kind of racism you experience amongst other people of color, some of it was just, hey, that's just how we talk to each other, It's like in Hawaii, they do it a lot, actually. They make fun of each other's race, and it seemed like it was a normal thing. Like when I was in high school, it was like, oh, the Mexicans make fun of well, everybody was making fun of each other. Latinos were making fun of themselves. Then they're making fun of like Filipinos and blacks, and the blacks were making fun of everybody, and the Filipinos were making fun of everybody. You know what I mean? It's like it was different. But the moment that like a white guy said something, it's like, wait a minute. Because in my high school back then, the minority were the white kids. This was in the 90s, and but did I experience discrimination from white folks, yeah, I've experienced it. I mean, like when we were young in the 90s and stuff, even just like when we go up to areas like Reno or something like that, or like Tahoe, the minute that you walk into the store, like all the security is like just following you everywhere. You know what I mean? All you got to be is brown. and or you just look like you're not from there. And I remember in the Bay Area, it like everybody is a little bit, in terms of diversity, everybody's a little bit more mixed now, and all the younger folks are like all cool with that. But I'll tell you, man, like when we were growing up, if you just drove down to San Mateo, which wasn't that far, it was about maybe a 20-minute drive or something like that. Like it was like night and day between where we lived and on that side, And it's the same way in San Francisco. There are some neighborhoods that are just like, the uppity neighborhoods, and then you go over the next block, and it's just like totally. We got the projects and stuff. So it's kind of San Francisco is weird like that. And the Bay Area is funny like that because like
we're extremely diverse in this place. This place
Yeah.
is extremely diverse, and plus the population density within that diversity. I mean, it's one of the reasons why we're still in the early phase 2, where if we lived in Georgia, we'd be like running around like much more without all the coronavirus restriction. But over here, that population density has kept us pretty tight. But it's also given us a very unique experience within that diversity. It's one of the few places where you could see literally everyone from all sorts of places. But we're still divided in terms of tribes and in terms of like class structures that definitely exist for sure.
It was definitely evident. I think in the Bay Area, it's more mixed now. But I remember growing up in the 90s and the 80s, things were more segregated. Not systematically by the government that I know of, but like people lived in certain neighborhoods that were not the same as our neighborhoods.
I mean, there was a redliner in neighborhoods that did exist, or that was kind of like the untold thing where the real estate agents or whoever wouldn't sell it or wouldn't recommend in those certain places. Because I remember when my parents moved into our neighborhood, it was still very Irish Italian. And so when those folks were moving, eventually there was a white flight in San Francisco that happened in the 70s and 80s, and brown people started moving in, all kinds of brown people. And then Chinese people moved in eventually in the 90s after Hong Kong was turned over to China. And so you'll see these things happening within San Francisco where certain ethnic groups will move in, and other groups will move out. And so a lot of those folks moved into the San Mateo County area. They moved to just somewhere down the peninsula, or they moved as far out as the East Bay, or even further. But that's just the makeup of things. Oh yeah. But when we moved into the neighborhood, it's not like people brought us like apple pie and stuff. I don't remember that. In fact, they brought us graffiti on the wall. I remember that. Swastikas and KKK and just
golly, now you think about it, I'm remembering those moments now. Like it's all flashing back as you're talking about it. Because we had a racist neighbor. We had a few racist neighbors actually across the street, white guy.
Oh,
and the funniest thing is this guy was racist, right? But then he ended up like, because he was just one of those guys. He was racist to be cool. For him was a white guy who was being racist to be cool. He was just trying to fit into whatever was cool. And one of his friends was like a freaking Nazi, man. And so, they would paint swastikas and stuff like that. Jeez, I must have forgot all this stuff. Well, you just brought it up and just went boom like that.
Dang.
Must be some weird coping mechanism or something. But that dude was racist, man. But then like I said, he was doing it to be cool because later on, when hip hop got big and hip hop and gangster rap got big, then he switched with the crowd. That was because that was the crowd back then. So he was like a white guy who joined like all the hip hop guys and stuff like that. And so he was all about
he had to sell his weed to somebody. He was selling his weed to all of those people, so he couldn't be freaking Nazi anymore. That's what he was doing.
Drugs,
I mean, he was selling drugs out to all those people. And it's like, whatever. It's
what?
Yeah, but his one of his buddies was pretty big time racist because I remember
Yes.
them. Not only the graffiti, they would like. Oh man, dude! Like one of our cousins got into a big fight with them because like they're always calling us like we'd be walking across the street and they call us Ching Chong Chinaman and Yellow Man and always calling us Chinese and shit like this, all this Ching Chong China shit. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's golly, that's true. And I remember my cousin, my cousin is deaf, all right, but he was a big fan of Bruce Lee, so he trained, and he practiced. And one time they were harassing my other cousin because she was living with us at the time, and she was just learning how to drive. I haven't observed her drive. Sorry, Yolanda, if you're watching this, but I don't know how good of a driver she is now, but back then she was pretty bad, and she was not a great parker. She was not good at parallel parking. And she had a car that didn't have power steering, man. So it was just bad, dude. And like, but then this guy, Sean, my next door neighbor's, maybe I shouldn't use his name, but my next door neighbor's racist friend was out there just like harassing her and just like talking about, see, Chinese don't know how to drive. And like, she's already stressed out because she can't freaking park the car. And my cousin got so pissed. He got out of the car, ripped off his shirt, and he was really buff back then, And this dude, man, he just got like, his like bravado just turned into like, he turned into a little mouse. And he kept on backing away, but my cousin just kept on approaching him, was trying to punch him in the face, but the guy just kept on running, And yeah, he was an asshole. I don't know what happened to him. 1 minute he was there in our neighborhood, then he just like disappeared. I think his brother, who used to go to our high school too, I think told me that if I can remember, I might be mixing up stories, but I think he went to prison for something. Yeah.
Wow.
Probably like being racist, doing some racist shit.
No, he
was
just
racist. You remember that guy, right? The tall dude used to hang out with the.
Yeah. No, he was a antisocial, disagreeable kind of like, not a very good human being. Not a very good human being.
Yeah.
So I mean, he's
his brother would even tell me that.
he gets what he deserves. So I mean,
I don't know if you heard, but I was saying his brother. From what I remember, his brother told me he's in jail then, or went to jail.
So would you guys say,
doing something?
Mark, at least, would you say that's the most memorable, let's say, racist or discriminatory thing that's happened to you?
You know what? I think there's quite a few things. I just have to jog my memory. Once Jay said that, then everything was like, because I think for the most part, most of my life, I've been trying to, because I've been trying to like either forget, like just kind of like, I've been dealing with reconciliation, basically, a process of reconciliation in my life where it's not that I'm forgetting things, but maybe I am, but trying to let go of things. And so like when we talked about things in my past that make me really angry, it takes me a while to get the memories jogged in. And when you ask me if there has been racist things, when I start thinking back, I'm like, God, like there's been tons. There's been a lot of little subtle things and a lot of things that were really obvious,
Yeah, it's interesting, especially growing up here with all the diversity here as well. Yeah, I didn't really experience the same things as what we were hearing in the States on like TV or the news or whatever. Like, I didn't experience any of that. So honestly, I don't even think I would have a story except for one, which really stands out because it just really pissed me off at that time. So like we were at a Starbucks somewhere at a mall, and there was this guy. I guess he was mute or something.
Right.
Kind of like begging and stuff. So he'd give you a card saying this and this and asking for money. I didn't have any change or anything, so I didn't give him anything. And he goes to the next person, I guess a table over, who's like Chinese or whatever. So he gives him some money, and then after he gets the money, the guy looks at me and he's just like this, and then like this.
Yeah.
To be fair, I think this is like sign language for Chinese or Asian or something.
Oh.
Fine, that's fine. But yeah, but then following up with this, like, come on, really? That's I just remember I was just so pissed off. I'm like, what the like, what?
Wow.
Like, we're just like, if we have change, we'll give it, but you don't have to like mock us or do whatever. Like, it's insane. So yeah, again, these things don't normally happen, so that just stood out in my mind. I was just like, what the hell? This
What's
is crazy.
fun? Person that you're talking about exactly.
Huh?
There was, I think I know the person that you're talking about exactly, because there isn't like a well-known mute hobo. Is that the politically correct term? No, it's not.
Yeah, if he's still around, you
homeless
probably
guy.
run into him.
Yeah, no, I think I think I know who you're talking about.
Yeah,
That's
so
funny.
that's the one that really stands out whenever I think of a time that
Wow.
something like that happened to me. So
Yeah.
pretty interesting. I don't know. You have anything like that, Ito?
Again, like I don't have any like life-changing experiences, but there have been instances where like yeah, that's sorry, that's really funny, but
You know, it's funny though. This thing, I think we've all got that so many times that most of us have even forgotten when people have done it.
The funny part is, I was working at a Starbucks in a Safeway, and there was this like he wasn't really homeless. I knew he worked, but I don't think he had like a place to live. Construction, but he never had like a hard hat on. Anyways, I've seen him before. I used to see him a lot because I don't drive, right? I take the bus a lot, and I'd see this guy in the bus too. And I forgot what was happening, but I was just closing the till bar or whatever, and then he was just chilling there because he normally does that. He just chills at the Safeway because again he just doesn't have a place to live. And then I think I was just so I just didn't like him, and I could tell he was like racist because he was like mocking a Filipino security guard just the other day or something like that, and then I just didn't like the fact that he was in my space or in my area, so I was just like, visibly showing that like I didn't like the fact he was there. I was like closing up or whatever, and then basically he just called me a chink. And yeah, I was younger at the time, and I was like, oh my god, like this makes me so mad. So I was like, yeah, what you call me? This was when I was like, I was like super cocky. So I was like, oh yeah, okay. And I think the store ended up calling the cops or whatever, and that was the end of it. Like, it's hard for me to try to recollect the exact thing, but yeah, he basically called me a chink. And so, like, from my experience, there have been similar moments like that where there's a lot of like racism, but I just think that I'm educated, but it's whatever. Doesn't really change my life. It's really fun.
You know what's interesting about
it's funny because he was chinkier than I am. I was just
really. Oh no!
About it because like it was kind of adorable because he was like this trinky white dude. He looked like freaking hillbilly. Yeah, that's a perfect like example of him. He looked like a hillbilly. But
he had slanted. He had like small eyes.
Yeah, he's like think of what's his name? The guy from Walking Dead. The guy from Walking Dead,
really?
With the crossbow. Yeah, he kind of looked like him. But yeah,
wow.
Like I've never seen him again, but I used to see him a lot everywhere. But I don't know. I personally think that if I was white or if he wasn't as discriminatory or if he wasn't racist and I got to know him, I personally think like he'd be okay guy because yeah, he seemed like a nice guy. So he's just really stupid. It's just funny because he called me a Chinese. I was like, what? I'm not even Chinese.
You see, now that you bring that stuff up, I'm having moments like you, Mark, where I think there are some things I think
right?
have been
You know,
things seem to be coming back, but I just can't remember the full stories. Maybe it's better like
Yeah.
that.
I think many of us do, and
Better
I'm
like
sure
that.
that many of the people like out there, who might be listening right now would have like very, some sort of similar kind of experience. I think that when it comes to like racism and in institution, there's, I think we all have some sort of experience, where we might have felt like the color of our skin in some way was the factor in people welcoming us in and out. Like I remember I used to like go visit Episcopal churches. I'm a priest in Episcopal church, and so I would love to go visit Episcopal churches, and it hasn't happened in a while, but I do remember experiences in the 90s where you go into a place and they'll say, "Hey, what are you doing here? The Catholic Church is just up the street. I'll tell you where it is." Like, dude, right? Like, thanks,
Yeah,
man.
yeah.
All right, thanks. I get it. Then I got to show them I'm a freaking card-carrying member, or hey,
Yeah.
ordaining the Episcopal
Great old
Church, dude.
That's hilarious.
That's just like the story of like that Detroit police chief being stopped by his own officers and being interrogated for stealing a car, right? And I'm like, dude, that's the chief.
Not
I mean, so I think these things do happen, and they have to be addressed, because then why would someone like automatically think like, yeah, oh, that guy right over there, based on the color of their skin and the way they look, that guy goes to the Catholic church up the street, but not to this church. Now, I haven't experienced that in church in a long time. These are earlier experiences, but they have happened. I mean, that's not. I'm not going to name that church, but yeah.
When I was younger, I was definitely way more like super conscious about like being discriminated. Like in grade 12, I went to a private school. It was all Dutch kids here in Surrey. And at that time, I always felt like I was just like an other, just because like I was, everyone else was like Dutch or Korean, actually. Dutch or Korean. It was like a Dutch school though, like a Dutch reforms. Yeah,
Dutch
reform,
Korean.
But those are like a lot of exchange students. That's why I mentioned Korean. But it was mainly like a Dutch reform school, so a lot of white kids. And when I was younger, I was just way more like self-conscious. So because I was new, because I always felt like awkward. I always thought like, oh, they're just discriminating me, and that's kind of how I felt. But now that I've gotten older, I was just like, whatever. I work with a bunch of like white people now, so I don't really care.
Yeah, I think,
you know what I mean?
The defense mechanism now is just either I forget it or I just laugh about it. Because like you were saying, Mark, a lot of times within non white or Caucasian groups, we make fun of each other, and it's like usually it's okay, but it's true once they do it, then. But I don't know.
And that's a reflection of like that where the kind of power that might someone have, given the context. That I think that's definitely true.
Yeah, that's
I mean, what I find interesting is I think it is a coping mechanism, but because I think that one of the things that our ethnic studies teacher told us always, Dan Begonia, says not one day that goes by. Yeah, it's not one day that goes by where you're not
consciously or unconsciously reminded,
or unconsciously reminded of who
that
you are
not,
because of the color, but yet you are not part of the club because of the color of your skin. And when you think about that, there are so many subtle things that remind you, whether it be someone doing this or or I don't know. There's always something, and it's weird because it's like what you were talking about, like when you're younger, you're almost looking for it, right?
Yeah.
But then and then like everything started to piss you off and stuff. And I think I was a lot like that, especially in university. And when I was in high school, I think I probably seeked it out, maybe, perhaps, or was very much more observant or more sensitive to it.
Sensitive,
Right.
And I think
Sensitive-
part of the
sensitivity is
coping
definitely-
mechanism sometimes, part of the coping mechanism sometimes when you're always constantly seeing it is to forget about it, or you try to let it go, and you just try to move on and stuff, you know.
It's better than being angry all the time, but I mean, sometimes there is a righteous anger, as James Cone would say. Hey, remember that time, Mark, when your high school counselor said that you weren't good enough to go to college? I mean, do you think that was something about like your own ethnicity?
That was
your own race.
That was one thing, man.
Yeah, you're freaking educated. You're the most educated person amongst us, dude. I mean, seriously, you are. So you've done more school than everyone else. Yes, you have.
They actually said that though.
Yeah,
that's probably because what that guy said to me way back then. It was a counselor out of high school, and he told me I wasn't good enough to get into college. He basically said
why did he say that?
What was the context here?
Because I wasn't like A+. I was more on the B average.
And what did he think of Filipinos? I mean, most Filipinos were like, "Oh, at best, you're going to city college." That's what they thought.
Is that what they said?
Yeah, he didn't really.
Come on.
Well, yeah, during the time in the 90s, a lot of the Filipinos were kind of
1 out of 4 Filipinos.
Okay,
in
we're
the
a bunch of
1990s
knuckleheads back then. I think
we're dropping out of high school.
Yeah, 1 of 4 were dropping.
Especially inner city kids, yeah.
Yeah, especially inner city kids. It was about attrition rate was 1 out of 4 in high school, and then by the time they got to university, that 1 out of 4 would also be another 1 out of 4. So just out of 4 people,
it was 1/2 in university.
Was it 1/2?
Yeah, so that's even.
That's funny, man.
Yeah, you were talking to the counselor because you were wondering about university.
Yeah, he's supposed to.
He didn't think I was good. He didn't think I was good enough for it. He's like, wow. There's nothing wrong with a junior college or anything like that. But he just said, just go to a junior college. I don't think you'll get into any universities. And I'm like, huh? Just
what
like,
the fuck,
dude,
what an asshole.
I ended up going into. I got into a school, so it's like I got into a university. So it's like I don't know what that guy was talking about. And,
would it be also because universities, like, maybe they're famously not taking or not being the most diverse? Like, was it in that context as well, or no?
This was in the 90s.
I think it was just him because this advisor was kind of old school. You know what I mean? And he was definitely from a different time. He was old school. He was definitely from a different time. I mean, the guy, he was white, and the guy looked like Mr. Flanders from Simpsons. So everybody knows who this dude is. Whenever I talk about him, and anybody who went to my school knows who I'm talking about. And the guy was definitely old school. He looked like Mr. Flanders. He had bell bottoms and shit like that, and a big old 70s mustache and stuff. And he was just definitely that was not good advice for a young person who wanted to go to university. And it was just kind of weird. And whether he consciously or unconsciously thought I couldn't do it, I mean, that could have affected me if I didn't have enough kind of want, like, if I didn't know any better, I would have just said, okay,
Yeah,
I would have just given up.
Maybe that developed you for the better, made you.
In some ways, yeah. I mean, like, I've heard people who've gone through real racist experience. Right? Yeah. I've heard people who've gone through, like, really hardcore racism, whatever hardcore means, but, like, especially, like, black folks, right? Like, what they've been dealing with. And a lot of them, they had the grit, what they call grit, to be, and the ability to be able to kind of transform that energy into something else. Like, I think before we started the stream, we were talking about the Detroit police chief who was beat up by cops, man, because the cops used to beat up all the black kids in the neighborhood and stuff randomly just to assert their power. And this guy in the 50s was beat up by the cops when he was 14 years old. and then he instead of just being angry about it, he told himself that he would want to change the system from within, and he became a cop and still had to deal with a lot of racism. He almost got killed by his own. Well, they were trying to kill him. People from his own the police department were trying to kill him because there was racism and racial division within the Detroit Police Department, and so like all the way from even through the 60s to the 80s, then he finally moved on up to become a supervisor, and then moved on to become the chief in '94. And even as chief, he got pulled over by his own cop. So, he was still experiencing that stuff. But he was able, in the end, he was able to make a lot of change. It wasn't probably like the maximum change he wanted, the optimal change he wanted, but he was able to make some change in that department and transform his experience into something life-changing for him and his community. And I think that's what we do with this. I guess that's why we're doing this, right? We may or may not remember all our experiences, but we're at least trying to create discussion here.
That's true. And like to tie these experiences with some of the older Filipino generation, and just hearing that I mean, we have some racism too. We have some thoughts on African Americans or Black people, whatever you want. Yeah, what have you guys heard about those generations and their thoughts on?
Well, I'll tell you that a lot of the older generation. Oh God. Okay, how do I start? Okay, so a lot of the older generation, from my observation, it's all about what they feel, where they match their ethics and their morality. And for them, many of them feel like you gotta listen, to listen, and you got to follow. You know what I mean? And to follow, to be good, you have to follow what law enforcement or government tells you to do, because they are the people who hold the power, and they're good. There's an assumption that they're good, and that what they're doing is good, and that they trust them. They put their trust into the government, and usually it's more of the conservative side. And
don't you think it has part to do with being like outside of the Philippines? Because I mean, our parents would have came from a place where they will always see this generally. Well, not always, but for the most part, they will see being here in North America or UK as a way better alternative than being in the Philippines. And so there is a deep sense of gratitude that comes with how they speak. And so when they do see Americans, people in America, kind of like not happy, not
satisfied,
not celebrating this American dream thing, which I mean that's another conversation. But not celebrating that is disturbing to them, because their narrative is that this is the land of milk and honey. Hey, we just exodus into Egypt, where there's like this is the place of salvation here. That's a narrative that, whether or not it's truly true, that's another thing. But that's part of the narrative that makes us accept, I think, why things are the way they are. And like for example, you definitely hear this in our parents' generation. When in Rome, do what the Romans do. That was their thing. Hey, this is not your country anyway, but this is a heck of a lot better than where we came from. So just do what you do. Don't make waves. It's okay if you're a stranger in a different shore, but your opportunities are better here. And so that's what they're hedging their bets on. And so I think that part of that comes into conflict with being raised here and being told, yeah, your opportunities are immense, they're great. And then when you realize, there are certain ceilings. It is about who you know, and if I don't know those people, I might not be part of the club there. people do have perceptions about like what I look like based on the color of my skin and the and class and religion, and they will make judgments on all of those kind of things. And that's how the human being is. We'll make judgments about that.
And the funny thing is, if your beliefs are so strong and polarized to one side or whatever, it's like it doesn't matter what somebody else says. It's like it doesn't matter what somebody else says. It's always going to be wrong, even if you have dialogue. And that's a child. I think I find that the most challenging part on the extremes of both sides, with either liberal or conservative, is when they get to the point where it's like, no matter what you say, if I talk against Trump, you're bad. You know what I mean? Or no matter what I say, if I try to be reasonable and thoughtful about what he said, he meant this, like then like an ultra liberal will be like, nah, man, you're racist. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like it's difficult sometimes. It's difficult sometimes. But on racism, I feel it can be pretty clear. I mean, that dude, George Floyd having his neck crushed like that was very clear. And I don't know, the look on the cop's face and how he did it and didn't even listen to the folks who are around there and the cops who did he even, I mean, any martial art or anything that you do, anybody who's involved with law enforcement, they know once the man is in control, then, and they don't have to reinforce that anymore. You're supposed to check on his well-being after they have him in control. And he wasn't even moving, and he was hardly moving when the guy was on his neck. He could have put his knee on his shoulder to control the body. There are things that I feel are very clear. But when it comes to like what our going back to like some of the older generation and how they feel towards like things like particularly protesting, like we know some folks out there, some who have, who are in their 20s and they're going out in the streets and protesting, and they're protesting. They're not looting and joining the rest of that group. But some of their parents, they can't understand why they're doing it, because in the Philippines, if you're doing that stuff, you're considered like, they automatically like connect you to like NPA or the communist or something like that, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like a different thing in the Philippines. It's like, oh, dude, you're protesting, you're part of that kind of like communist group or something. And that's not how we see things over here. It's a different kind of mentality. And I don't know, man, like it's one of those things that just tend to persist with the older folks, and
they don't really have a lot of
just
diverse experiences with other people. Like I know that my parents don't really know a lot of Black people, right? So those types of interactions they don't really have. They've never really have, especially growing up. So they do have this misconception about other people, especially because we're surrounded by a lot of Sikhs, a lot of Punjabis, and my our older our older parents, they didn't grow up with them, and so they have this like other mentality of them, like, okay, they're Bombay, we're Filipino, therefore different, therefore see differently because they never grew up with them. Now, I grew up with a lot of Sikhs and a lot of other nationalities and that, so I tend to think that I'm a bit more open-minded, even though I'm still kind of racist. But like, definitely because of my experiences are different, and with terms to diversity, I have an open-mindedness compared to how the older generation, most of their interactions with the foreigners are usually like, what this, Raus, right? So they have, and their interactions with a lot of white people have been very positive. Therefore, they will see white people way more positive, as opposed to again their only interactions with other other nationalities usually are through media, which are, again, we can go down this rabbit hole of media being controlled by the white people or whatever. And so that's what their perception is of other people. And therefore, and even I can definitely attest to like coming to Canada for the first time, and then the first interaction with somebody who is different from you, and it's negative. That's definitely gonna like stick to you more, and because of the fact that you see them as an other, it'll definitely give that higher divide of you trying to interact with them or see them in a different light or in a positive light. So like basically racism still exists and whatnot. But,
yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like in the older generation, like there is quite a negative connotation attached to African Americans or Black people, especially in the Filipino community. I feel like, I don't know, what do you like? Do you guys see that?
I feel that there's honestly a little bit of colonial mentality connected to that. Just you know what I mean? It's like, who are the people teaching them? It's kind of weird because the Philippines back then has a history of like Black folks helping out Filipinos, especially during the Philippine-American War when they brought the Buffalo Soldiers who were trained to kill the Native Americans. They brought them over. Majority of them were Black. A lot of them were Black. And many of them just escaped when they realized, man, this war is garbage. You know what I mean? Like they ended up escaping in the Philippines and then working with Filipinos. And so there's a lot of history there that people like don't understand, that like, Black folks are part of Philippine history as well, and
correct.
And just a while ago, Rex Navarrete is an old friend.
Oh yeah, classic.
Comedian guy. He went. Huh?
Yeah, we went to college.
Yeah, we went to the same
school. Are you serious?
We went to the same.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're all part of the ethnic studies.
Really?
Well, not the department, but we were in the ethnic studies program, and he was always there helping out and stuff, and
that's hilarious.
Telling his jokes and stuff, and he even played with my band for a couple shows. So
really,
but
wow.
yeah, he's a good guy. And he posted up something like kind of like a never forget moment, and the picture was from St. Louis, and I think the caption was something like, "Hey, remember those old days when white Christian Americans needed to be entertained, and they could just sit around and laugh at the Igorots doing their rituals?" Yeah, it's kind of like. And then he mentioned like, this is the reason why, Black Lives Matter, and we have to understand it. Basically, is because we've experienced that kind of like.
Yeah.
Are you guys finding that a lot of people are posting on that St. Louis fair recently? I feel like it's popping up. Are you finding that a lot of people are posting on that St. Louis fair recently?
Yeah.
It's popping up on a lot of.
Yeah.
Like Facebook or social media.
Because it's a blatant use of discrimination to, especially amongst Filipinos to kind of understand. And a lot of the things that people are posting up now too are the stuff that happened like in Stockton, Solano County, and other areas in California. Because, in California itself, in America, they had the worst, all throughout America, the worst amount and the most amount of anti-Asian laws. And they hated Filipinos because Filipinos were coming in, were another immigrant source that were coming in to and taking jobs as farmers. Yeah. And so
the white folks were, taking the jobs as farmers, but we were definitely coming in. I mean,
and they were also marrying white women. That was another big reason people were pissed off. Yeah. They were marrying white women because there used to be these dance halls. There was these dance halls where it was like a dime a dance or something like that, right? And so all the Filipino guys, because there was hardly any of the Filipino women there, they needed some kind of like female interaction because the laws prevented. I think it was how many women per men? I forgot. It was a ratio,
like 1 in 50.
It's like
it was
pretty bad.
That was a big one for the Chinese immigrants. Like
Yeah.
Yeah. There was so many anti-Asian laws, and Filipinos were a part of that. And you'll see these pictures like that say "No Filipinos and dogs allowed," and you're like, "What the fuck?" You know, like if you didn't know about the anti-Filipino laws in America, you would totally miss it and be like, "We weren't part of that. We weren't part
It
of
was
that
just
racism."
only those
Oh, yes,
farm
we were.
workers, not us educated people. Oh man, no, it was
Oh, man.
everybody,
It was-
man. Everybody.
Oh yes, you were. You know, yeah, exactly. Like Filipinos were a part of the discrimination in America, at least in the United States. I don't know if there was anything crazy because there were lynchings. There were like planned lynchings by the, I don't know if you call them the West Coast KKK. I think they're called the White Knights or something like that. But they went out there like burning things and just like lynching Filipinos. Man, it was bad because they're pissed off about them taking their women and jobs, whether they were going to work the jobs or not.
Yeah, like they were gonna work the jobs. But I mean, that's a debatable thing too. But just when you see an immigrant group there that looks pretty tenacious and hardworking, and you're being challenged by your man, because guess what? Those white girls, you know, they like those hot little rabbits. I remember there was a term in there that was
What was the
consistently
name of the book
used.
that was all about that?
Oh gosh, there was a book.
What the heck?
Carlos Balusan
It was the Balusan book, right?
Era.
It was.
Was it the Balusan book?
Was it a Balusan?
I know he talks about the era. No, there was another one. There was quite a
No,
few.
there was something else. But
What's it called?
there was a phrase in
author?
there.
Well, one of the books for that time period was "America is in the Heart" by Carlos Balusan.
But I don't think it was at. Maybe it came out of Balusan's book, but I've heard it. It was mentioned a bunch of times, and of course, then Cordova.
Google Diamond Dance, and then type in Filipinos and Caucasian Americans or something like that.
Well, I think Fred Cordova also put it in his history books too. So
yeah. Vanessa, was it an article by Fred Cordova? I don't remember.
Might be. So
Interesting.
If any one of those folks know any Philam historian, Filipino American historian knows, let us know. But definitely that was a reference to like those Filipinos showing up in the dance halls and wooing white America there, at least white American gals. And so there was a connection there that was and that was happening since the when the Filipinos were able to arrive here as farm laborers. And a lot of people forget that, you know, the United Farm Workers, Cesar Chavez and all those guys, they were backed up by Filipino farm workers. And our dad,
the Filipino farm workers who started it first.
Right. And they were the major group.
They invited Cesar Chavez into it to because they knew they'd be stronger together.
Yeah.
So,
gosh, what was their names?
Larry Itliong
and De La Cruz.
Veracruz.
There you go. Philip Veracruz. I'm sorry. And those guys were the principal leaders out there. And a lot of people forget that kind of history. I remember getting an argument with some older Filipinos who came in the like 80s, and they were like totally denial that Filipinos were actually here before that as farm laborers. No, we came here as an educated professional class in the 1960s. And that's
true. Because there was an
But
immigration wave in the 60s.
there was
late 60s. Yeah.
there was an immigration wave that was still going on pretty much from the early 1900s all the way up to about the early 1970s of farm laborers working in Hawaii, working in the Central Valley of the state of California, and those are Filipino people.
Yeah.
And we have definitely Igorots who fell into that, who came into that, because my dad was recruited to be a farm laborer, and when they looked at his hands, they thought, hey, even though he did work on a farm, they thought, oh, your hands are too soft, and so they said no, which is great because then he joined the Navy, and that's how eventually our family ended up over here, is because Dad was in the United States Navy, which we're really thankful for. But a lot of his friends got in as in agriculture because they were agriculture students.
That's right.
And so they came in as farm laborers.
I also heard stories. I'm not sure, like, I didn't really do any research on this, but in Singapore, a lot of Filipino engineers had a lot of stake, I guess, in like making Singapore a thing. Like a lot of Filipino engineers were being
recruited.
Yeah, effectively, yeah. Because I remember hearing stories when I was younger, hearing stories about how I think it was like China who would get who were being taught how to do farming from Filipinos. I don't know if that's true or whatever, but I know that Singapore, they had a lot of like Filipino engineers helping those people out and whatnot. But Gerald, it's funny you mentioned that the whole, especially those pictures, because Carrie, what's her last name from
Sumiba?
Yeah, she had that whole she had that like essay, and I posted that on my story because I saw a guy from here, a Filipino dude, restaurant owner, I think. We talked about it before, Gerald, the guy that posted Apawangud, right? They posted on their story talking about I don't know. I was just really triggered because like I was talking to my friends about this, but I was just so like because I read Carrie's thing, and then I saw that exact post because Carrie was basically talking about how people are like not consciously, but they're taking those pictures out of context because they're not even mentioning that they're Igorots. And lo and behold, this person did the exact same thing. And I didn't want to call him out until now. Like, I haven't really interacted with him. I tagged him and I said, thanks for sharing. But that was after I posted all these things where I was like, basically saying, like, y'all don't post the pictures and just be like, oh, this is a Filipino context. Because I personally think that it's crazy that you mentioned that. I personally think that all these woke Filipinos are posting it and be like, oh my God, yeah, us Filipinos have experienced racism too. Oh, shut the fuck up. Like, the things you're posting, they're Igorots, all right? That's what pissed me off. I was like, what the fuck are you doing? So they posted the picture.
Filipino.
Right. No, but like back then they weren't seen as Filipinos at that time. So don't preach about that. That's what really pissed me off too. So they posted this picture and no mention of Igorots. It was just like all Filipinos were discriminated. They were used as animals. They were seen as animals. And then so I posted the Carrie's essay, right? Like all the stuff that she posted. The fact that you don't just look at these pictures and take it as it is and be like, oh yeah, us Filipinos. It just really bothered me because like no mention of Igorots. That's why I went on this tirade of like posting all this.
I wonder if they knew
stuff.
I mean, I wonder if they knew.
That's the thing, and that's the reason why I didn't want to like attack the person. I didn't want to call him out because like that's not productive. But at the same time, I just want to like point it out, like.
But that's why it's important for people to look into these things a little bit more, not just like take them and put context that they think is true without researching it enough.
Yeah. And to be fair, like they mean well, right? They mean well. I don't want to just be like make fun of
right,
or whatever, but they do, and they did mean well. It's just the fact that this is the second time, bro. You know what I mean? Second time you're posting Igorot, people not even fucking talking about Igorots. That's bullshit.
That's exactly it. That's what we're hoping other people will do, or I guess we can educate people on doing is just a little bit more research, man. It's not that hidden.
It's not that hard. We're here, bro. We're here.
You can look it up.
We're here. We're alive.
Yeah, there's quite a few articles on that St. Louis stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
It's there. Just look. I mean, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, man, it's really interesting because like I think that when if like someone who hasn't gone through our ancestors' experience, our experiences as Igorots, Igorot Filipino, you know what I mean, in the diaspora. For some folks who haven't experienced, other Filipinos, especially the younger ones, they just don't realize that, like, the old, especially with, there have been generations of discrimination towards Igorot folks in the Philippines, you know, and because they're, most of them are raised, especially for the ones raised abroad, they just see that as Filipino. And I think it goes along with what we were talking about last time, like the whole concept of, for those abroad, wanting to feel this sense of pan-Filipino-ness. And, you know, and sometimes that's needed. I think sometimes that's needed because sometimes you need critical mass. You need people to be in the same, on the same boat, so that, like, everybody could, like, get together, and when we need things, we can voice it out. You know, just like Black Lives Matter. It's like sometimes you need to it's good to kind of understand their struggle, compare it to yours, and I think part of what the protest should be about is including more people. You know, including more people so that they can understand that you're part of this too, kind of thing, right?
Well, I think that's what is happening. I mean, with the Black Lives Matter movement, it's really, I think that it gets muddled over when people try to say, well, shouldn't all lives matter? Yeah, that's actually true. All lives should matter, but the emphasis on Black Lives Matter has to do with the experience of Black people over here in America, and perhaps it's us translating around the world, that it's
definitely translating.
There are systemic stuff that happens to Black people all over the place that other folks don't experience. Right. And that's true. Don't experience. I remember, like, you know, sitting in like a Filipino eatery, and, you know, Black folks walk in there, and I don't know, but it looked like the servers all got kind of scared. It's like, no, these people want to eat our food. This is the best time to share it. But they were like, let's hope that they go away. And it's as if you could see that they were kind of ignoring them and kind of like just, you know, waiting for them to leave. I'm like, oh man, really? This is the opportunity to share our culture. You know, it's bad enough, you know, that we never, you know, that people don't give Filipino cuisine that they don't lift it up there as they do with other cultures. But maybe because we haven't done a great job sharing it, or maybe, you know, we put it on those sterno burners too long, and so it's really not too good. But
you know,
because we like buffet, right?
That's changing, though. The thing with Filipino food is definitely changing now.
Have you seen this video of, like, this Chinese man being heckled? Not heckled. He was basically attacked by, like, a group of like Black people.
That might have been the one in San Francisco.
Maybe, I don't know. There's a lot of.
And he was collecting cans, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's cans. The one. Yeah.
That guy was in San Francisco.
That's basically what that is. Like, yeah, sure, you're not serving those people in your restaurant or whatever. So they're, like, different cases, but that's effectively that's what it is. Like, you're just shunning these people out of your, trying to, like, have a shared experience, but you're talking them down, or you're just like, yeah, that's gross, man. It's stupid. Don't be dumb.
And so just going back to, like, what's it called?
Man, there is barbecue being cooked right next door.
We can't smell it, man. That's not fair.
I could smell it. It's just completely like
Filipino barbecue.
Yeah, Filipino barbecue next door. Because our neighbors are decided to barbecue. I'm like, dude, it just goes all over the place. Even if the windows are closed, it's just going. It's seeping through all the vents now. I'm like, wow.
Yeah. So just going back to the discrimination against the Igorots and why we take these things so personally when either we're not, the correct recognition doesn't happen, or something like that. Like, yeah, that's, I don't know. Like, what do you guys have experiences with discrimination from
Oh yeah.
other Filipinos on being Igorot. I
All
again,
the time, man. Once they find out you're Igorot, man, they just automatically be like, first there's
they get
a
all
sense of
curious.
disbelief.
Yeah.
They first think you're joking.
Yeah.
There's like a process. They think you're joking, they laugh, and then they realize you're being serious, that you're from there, and then they go like,
And then they
where
question.
again? And then you'll say, let's say like you say like, oh, Masla or Sagada or they know Sagada. They know Sagada now. But if you say Masla or any place else, Benguet, and they'll be like, where? Then you have to go,
what's that?
Baguio.
Baguio City.
Baguio. And Baguio. You're a
I know
Baguio
that.
person.
I visited that.
Yeah. Then you have to kind of like dumb it down and be like, yeah. It's Baguio
Again,
person.
for me, like I don't think I remember any specific examples, but it's more a lot of times they're just confused. They're just like, oh, what is that? They just don't know like what Igorots are, what Igorot people are. But yeah, nothing like just explicitly offensive or anything like that.
Talk about the one in Seattle.
Which one?
Remember last year? I think it was Auntie Juliet's group. They were doing the tadchok. And then there was that kid asking, what are they or something like that. And then the mom, talk about that.
Forgot about that.
Oh, what are they? Oh,
So
I'm curious.
Oh yeah,
What are we?
So it was interesting. Yeah, there was a performance. They were wearing like Igorot clothing and stuff. But anyway,
Kalinga.
Yeah, Kalinga. Yeah, I guess so. Anyway, we were just on the side watching, and there was this kid beside us with I guess their parent or whoever it was. Just like they were just. I guess the kid was just curious, obviously, just wondering what they were doing, and you know what. I don't even know exactly if what he said was it just like what are they doing or where is that from, but either way the parent answered and it was just like it's not important or something like that because it's not Filipino anyway.
What?
We're just like what? I don't know.
Yeah,
I was just confused and I was like, huh. Right. I totally forgot about that. Right.
It was really interesting because like my old church, right? Like my old church was a predominantly Filipino church, and so there was a mix of different folks from different areas of the Philippines over there. And then I remember like one time, I think they were doing there was like the diocese celebration, 150 years in the California diocese. Remember that, Jay? And so we were gonna do like a presentation, and part of the presentation was to do gangsa, and then like wear our wanus, our baag, or the G-string. And I remember one of the Filipinos got so like offended and saying like, you know what? That's just you guys. None of us wear that. Why do you have to wear that? And I remember I just got so fucking pissed, man. Because
what'd you say?
Well, because her background is like from Santo Tomas, and she's this big mestiza lady back, from a uppity family in where in the Philippines, in Manila. And so like she that was this is kind of like with that ignorance going on that has translated from generation to generation amongst other Filipinos towards Igorots. And I was just so angry because I said to her, don't you know, even before you got that what do you call that, Barong Tagalog, that all of you guys were wearing this too? And then she's like, it didn't cross her mind, like pre-Hispanic Philippines, like everybody was wearing the G-string. Everybody was wearing these clothes that looked like we were wearing, And it's like, how can you say that's not Filipino? And that's just us. I mean, I don't remember. I just remember being really pissed and just trying to explain that to her, and everybody having to, okay, calm down. Like all the other old Filipinos, calm down. when I was younger, I used to get really, really snappy about this kind of stuff. It's angry Igorot boy again over there. just calm down. But there was it wasn't that was just like the reason I think I got mad so quick, because there was other times she would say stuff to me, like about that, and I don't know if she knew it pushed my buttons or something like that, or she was trolling me, but she would do shit like that, and it used to piss me off because this was a major presentation amongst the diocese to celebrate it, and that to say that we're a part of it, and a big part of the Episcopalian Church is started from our area, northern Philippines, in the mountains, because many of the Protestant churches made a deal with the Roman Catholic Church not to go and spread out there. They stayed in our area. That's why most of us are like Protestant, especially part of the Episcopal Church. And she doesn't recognize that history. She just knows that, like, those are I think in her mind there was a clear separation in terms of class.
Definitely it's classic, because a lot of times the struggle for a lot of Filipinos is to be seen as equals in front of their white masters. So there is that thing that, in front of the colonial master, you got to look good, and you're not going to be like those monkeys over there. You're going to be like, like this. And that's kind of like how we were compared to. I mean, Igor people were compared to. We were the savages. We were the ones.
Exactly. I mean, that was the whole point of bringing us here originally. Right.
But then we were the one everyone wanted to see. I'm sure they got tired of eating dog every day.
That's
like,
what I'm
I
saying.
would have got tired of eating dog every day. I'm like, really? I'm tired of this. It's just like eating chicken every day.
Chicken?
Yeah, can we have chicken, please? Can you give us rooster? I want rooster.
Fucking pork,
fish.
Really
hey, let's have fish.
That post was because it didn't acknowledge the fact that it's because of these circulated images that the contemporary Filipino have that mentality towards Igorot, because they were shown that these people were so backward, they're so hedonistic, and so they're just so gross. Because of that was being shown that was what they saw of what Igorots were, that the Filipinos, the contemporary Filipinos, had that mentality. To this day still have that thought, and that's why that post pissed me off, because it never acknowledged that. It was just like a Filipino thing. And it's funny that we're really getting heated about this whole but this, especially your example where we were separated from the whole Filipino. Yet it's bothering me that we're being included in the Filipino. You know what I mean? How do I explain this? This?
Without the recognition of history and maybe in some sense but who would make the apology? That's the thing. But because I was listening to this thing on forgiveness by Bishop Tutu, and the whole thing about apartheid and people who wanted to. There's something called Abuntu, and people who had experienced, really crazy stuff. Their relative being killed or tortured, that kind of stuff. But yet, the whole premise behind Ubuntu is that to move on, I need to say, I need to have forgiveness to the perpetrator. I need to forgive the perpetrator for me to move on. And I find that really interesting, because there's a sense, that even for some of us Igorot folks, it's dude, you can't be talking about us if you haven't even recognized the stuff that your ancestors had discriminated on my people, right? So,
this is the important part, because one of the things about that, when you're referring to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa, which is how they started working kind of on a way to move forward, was and Bishop Tutu was the lead counsel for or lead advisor for that. The idea of Ubuntu is I am because you are, and you are because I am, and humanity. And so there's this deep interconnection with each other. In that process, it wasn't pertinent necessarily that a person says, I'm sorry, or acknowledges what they did. but they were invited to be part of the listening process. It was a deep listening process,
Yeah.
and it's generally was considered like successful. Did it work on changing systems? It helped people move forward. There's a lot of work still to do, right? But it helped people move forward. And the biggest thing, though, is it opened up a space for people to name their stories of pain and hurt, and have a person there, whether they acknowledge it or not, listen to it, or have the opportunity to listen to it. But it put out there whoever wanted to, who never needed to share a story about a lost loved one or the pain that they've experienced. They were there to share it, and if the person who was on the other side was there and wanted to be there, they could be there. And so it was a long process. It was hours and hours and years of listening to people come with their testimonies and sharing it, and then other people listening and being part of that process who were perpetrators at one time or another. And so it was opportunity for people who, whether they were separated by, what power that they had, or what class, or what race, ethnicity, it was an opportunity for some truth telling, and also, and it offered people the opportunity to forgive, to let go, the thing that the attachment that they're holding on to, the deep scarring. It offered people a way of healing. And so perhaps one of the things for us, with people, isn't necessarily that we're expecting other people to acknowledge our Igorotness. I don't expect that, to be honest. At my age now and the way I feel now, I don't. But I think it's our responsibility to go out there and show and share. And if those people are willing to listen, other Filipinos are willing to listen, that's great. I think they should. But we also have to make a presentation. We have to take the responsibility. You can't talk about any sort of rights thing without taking responsibility. So if we want to be acknowledged amongst the pantheon of Filipinos, which I think we are, or getting more there to it, because anytime they show those nice videos of the Philippines, somehow they're always in the mountains showing, those nice Igorot gals with the topless and all that, or they're having us with the banga dance that we've now adopted, as our own now, even though that's, and so things like that. I mean, you see Igorot people in those kind of shots, and it's important. There is an acknowledgement there, but we also have to share our stories too. And so there needs to be a willingness to
Jay, you're out. Your mic is gonna. You're back.
Am I back?
What the hell?
What'd you press?
Yeah, you're back. What did you say?
Oh, well, when did I go?
Just now.
Just about 5 seconds ago.
Oh, I mean, there has to be an acknowledgement that we need to speak until justice wakes. That I think is true. And justice, not about retribution or revenge. Justice about restoration, about becoming whole. The acknowledgement of being whole people, and having that, and having people honor that. I think those are very important for us. So we definitely have to share. If we're not out there sharing,
for like.
And to be fair, we weren't like systematically oppressed in a way, right? There wasn't like some sort of program. We weren't like there wasn't any form of genocide. Yeah, it was more banal, right? There wasn't like a systematic genocide towards our people. So in that sense, there has been some justice, like I've seen. Like I think it was somebody. I think we talked about this where I was ranting this guy on Instagram, calling himself like Igorot or whatever. But then someone pointed to me. I was like, he's like, no, be happy about it, because before, back in the day, like these non Igorots, they would look down on Igorots. They would like, but now there's a more interest in it. There was a more positive a positive image or perception of who Igorots are compared to how it was in the past. There is some sense of justice in that. But so how do we recognize?
Yeah.
How can we reconcile like how in the past we were not included into the Filipino pantheon, yet now there's a new I guess like issue where we're not being acknowledged because we're too muddled into the Filipino pantheon. How do you like reconcile that?
Do you guys remember the joke from Rex, actually, since you brought Rex up, where people would or Filipinos would be like, I'm not one of those Filipinos, I'm Spanish.
Wait. That's my
yeah.
Did you guys ever run into that?
Spanish.
Because I definitely did here.
Hell yeah.
And,
Hell yeah, yep. Definitely.
And
That,
it's really
well, you know, the
interesting
lady
how-
I was talking about, she was mestiza, and she, class-wise, well, there was a whole... People were identified in the Philippines. People were identified by class, like if you had Spanish blood, and there were certain classes.
Filipinos. They were actually called Filipinos, whereas the natives, non-Spanish mix, they were
Indios.
something else. Exactly.
They were called Indios.
Indigenous or whatever. Yeah,
Indigenous.
that's right.
Yeah,
That's the thing. Everybody.
So there were
everybody
different classes.
claimed that they were Spanish, but it seems like the same people are saying the opposite now, and
Yes.
referencing all this Igorot stuff again
Exactly.
without appropriately crediting the source. So I don't know. That's just what I've seen here, at least.
Yeah, I mentioned like the story of my friends where I was talking to Mario about like how our dances are. Me and Mario were just like riffing, right? And then our friends were just like chiming in. She's like, "Hey, I wonder if you guys are part of a tribe." She was referring to other friends of ours, and I was like, they aren't. You know what I mean? Because they're not Igorots for one thing. And sure, you can. And I've had this conversation with the same person too. It's like you can go back in time, and eventually you're gonna hit like some sort of tribe, maybe like 200 years ago. But the difference with us is the fact that we're still a tribe. You know what I mean? We're still indigenous.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, no, I do agree with that because like even with second generation kids that are our age, they'll still have that like, oh, I'm half Spanish mentality. And then if you look at like the younger folk, there's the other side of the pendulum where it's like, oh, maybe we're actually tribu too. And then they try to identify with that. So that's an interesting thought on that actually, because if you look at the generation, oh no, indigenous tattoo, no, that's taboo. And now it's like the younger generation is like, oh, tattoos. Oh, Filipinos. Oh, we were called the painted ones. Wow, pintados. I had this conversation with a coworker too. She's a kid, and she's like, you know, the Filipinos, we were called. I was like, yeah, pintados. No. We were called like the paint. Like, yeah, pintados. Just so there's young people who are uneducated, and then there's old people that are uneducated, and I'm uneducated too. Like I know nothing about the Moros. I know nothing about the people of the South. And I just got introduced to these people called the Tiboli. Really interesting people. They're very similar to Burmese and whatnot. It's really cool. So I'm also ignorant as well. But when it comes to because the Igorots have this romantic thing with the Filipinos, it definitely does frustrate me because they're much more pronounced within the larger Filipino community.
It's true. It's so easy just to get frustrated on our end, but I think we just gotta remember that it's the same thing. That's one of the reasons why I started this, because I know you guys know a lot more than I do about Igorots, and it's one of the reasons.
I think we're all learning, man. We're all learning.
It's one of the ways for me to learn, at least, right? So everybody's learning, and if they're a bit ignorant about it, I mean, that's what it is, and it is frustrating, but again, we just got to do a better job of educating and I guess maybe putting content out there or whatever we need to do. So
I think the content's really important.
That is true. Go ahead.
we need more people from just Igorot folks putting stuff out. Not letting other folks
Not the
talk about us.
not the tourism agencies.
Wait, it's more
Doing all
fun in the Philippines.
But it's
Oh
hard to
yeah,
say
that's right.
just-
That was the more recent slogan. It's more fun in the Philippines, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's hard to say too, because
yeah.
sometimes even if they are Igorot, maybe they have incorrect information or whatever. But as long as they're open to some discussion, I think I guess it's a good thing, right? So that accuracy is a little bit difficult to achieve, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I think Mark, you mentioned the term too, like closet Igorots. There are still some like right. I know, like me and Gerald, we know a lot of Igorot folk that aren't active in Bebop, and like not to say that they're not proud to be Igorot or whatever. That's another conversation actually. The fact that anyways, but closet Igorots, like, because like our parents, they weren't as vocal, or they weren't as sensitive, I guess, when it comes to like how we feel, especially. It was just kind of like, for them, it was just like, just head down, work, and if people are spitting on you, show them up, just work, right? So there is that.
Our parents dealt with that, man, and when they were pissed, they would just start talking in their mother tongue, starting Kankanai, and they'd be like, "What did you say?" That actually happened to my mom. Actually, I remember when she told me when she was, I guess she was interning at the time, when she was still, becoming a nurse, and she was helping out one of the doctors who wasn't Igorot, and like he was really talking down to her, and my mom got pissed, and she started speaking Kankanai, and he didn't understand, and she just got even more mad at her, because he knew that but my mom was talking under her breath and shit. So it was, I remember stories from some of the older folks, and they really had to hide. In some ways, they had to hide who they were, because they didn't want to deal with the discrimination, especially if they went down to the cities. If they went down to the cities, it's like, oh man.
And you don't have a critical mass. I mean, what are you gonna do if you don't have a critical mass? And that's a hard gig to go into.
Yeah, I think somebody recently posted. I think it was from Seattle or something. One of Seattle people, Edel. I don't remember if you saw, but they're telling a story, or California. They're telling a story about how I think they were talking to some just regular Filipino titos. Again, it came out that they were Igorot or something, and they just said that they were Filipino or something.
Yeah, no, that was Carrie's
It was
post.
still Carrie, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was just like, it's I don't know. It's still, I don't understand. I don't understand these
I
stories.
remember. So I had an ex girlfriend, right? And she had these. Back in the day, there was Concord. Was basically I don't know. It's mainly white folks in Concord, right? And all the Filipinos who were out there, had to deal with that. And they coped with it in several ways. They either were really Filipino or they were just trying to be coconut. You know what I mean? And I remember my ex-girlfriend had these two friends. And I'm not going to name names. I'm just going to say two friends. But like, I knew them for a while, all the time that I was dating her at that time. And then we went to a wedding, and then her mom comes out and she's wearing this straight up like Igorot dress, right? And then I see one of our uncles there from Bebop, Uncle Galas, and I was like, what? And this whole time I knew her for like 2 years. They're at this party, and I'm like, dude, you're Igorot? And she goes, I guess.
That's hilarious.
But this was when Concord was really, really like, white back in that time. I think it's a lot more diverse now, but back then it was different. So the girl didn't know much about her culture. I don't know if I can include her as a closet Igorot, but she was definitely not into her culture, whether she thought she was Filipino or even she knew about being Igorot, her mom was wearing the straight up dress, the full on patterns and everything like that. And then some folks from Bebop were there, and this whole time I didn't know that she was Igorot.
I can totally understand that. A lot of generations out there, younger ones that aren't necessarily into it. Like we've talked about this before. Like when I was younger, I was pretty much dragged to the Bebop events, right? So
Exactly.
but yeah, so it is what it is. It's just now finding culture and all these things is becoming such an it thing to do. So
well, we definitely want to celebrate who we are, and sometimes the reckoning, the coming to the understanding. I mean, how many Filipino folks have you met when you ask them, "Hey, where are you guys from?" Well, San Francisco or whatever, and it's like, no. Where are you from? I mean, where are your parents from? And
you got to be careful because that's kind of racist.
Well, when you ask our own folks out there, I know, but when we ask our own folks, and a lot of times, I've gotten so many non-responsive. I don't know. And then it's like, because first generation folks, a lot of times the way they identify with people is that's what they're gonna ask: where are you from? Or where your family's from, where your parents from, and that's where you get a location. And then oftentimes it'll be, oh, I visited there before. I used to live there. I used to date someone from there. I married someone from there. My children lives there now. Something like that, where you'll get hey, I have this thing in common with you response. And it's very common for our first generation folks to ask these kind of questions because they're seeking what we have in common. Now, for us, maybe for second, third generations, it feels like an odd question because we don't normally ask people where you're from. We ask people what they do. That's very kind of like Western kind of, well, at least Western American kind of question is, hey, what do you do? And so it might be that kind of thing where, for the folks who came over here and they wanted the kid just simply to have good lives, to achieve whatever the idea of success means for them, that thinking about race and identity it was not there. It just wasn't there a thing, and that's what was something that they were going to teach the kid. Or maybe they grew up outside of the Igorot world, and outside of the diasporas, and you got a lot of those cases where people moved away, a generation ago, and the kids wouldn't know, or even the parents wouldn't know because they're the ones who moved away when they were young, So
that's a good point. Sometimes even if the parents are come from Philippines, or grew up there, don't know much either, because some of the kids that we're running into, they're attending with our organization, they're attending the workshops and stuff because that's the only place they can find people to teach them about the culture. So that's pretty interesting as well, even though they were there in the Philippines.
That's true.
They weren't really learning or teaching. So
that's really common. A lot of times, I think we've talked about this too. It's some of the older generation that come in, or the first generation that come in, because they were just living there, and then they come over here. They only really learned about the culture when they went abroad, and a lot of that was because then they found a community where they can, they can have a sense of critical mass, and then share things that they had in common. So the culture would be the thing that they have in common, and even though they may not have say danced or celebrated the culture like they did here abroad, they're learning. Well, I mean, they didn't really celebrate back in the Philippines. They're celebrating more abroad than they did back there, and
exactly.
And they're learning here abroad.
Exactly. So I'm curious, Mark. Definitely. I know you have some stories of some discrimination stuff against Igorots in the States. How about in
the States?
In the UK, have you? I know you've moved there more recently, but have you come across anything like that, or?
No, well, most of the Filipinos we hang out tend to be from from our community.
Right.
So not necessarily, because like if anything, they just squabble amongst themselves, you know, whether it be like a Basal Sagara thing, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
But but like a lot of the from what my wife has told me, she's experienced it growing up. In fact, I don't even know
They're
if
in
I
UK,
should.
right?
Yeah, they're in the UK, so I don't know if I should talk about certain things just in case they watch this.
That's okay, but
there have been people who have treated Wendy a little bit differently. They even called her ugly when she was young. I mean, these were like supposed to be like her aunties and stuff like that, and they called her ugly because they thought that it was. I guess they're not Igorot, and they saw her as Igorot, and they're like, "Oh, she's so ugly." Oh, almost like pitied her for being ugly, or something like that. And these were like kind of like my mother-in-law had to be with, because there wasn't that many Filipinos at that time, so
right.
this was her community at the time. I mean, there wasn't that many. Yeah, there wasn't that many Igorots at that time. So it was different for them, like what they tolerated. And so they did experience that from other Filipinos, just that sense of kind of like difference, They were subtly told they were different. Although being told you're ugly because you're a Igorot, it's not really a subtle kind of thing. That's pretty blatant, you know what I mean? But my mother-in-law just happened to be a very industrious lady. And so she knew they were talking smack behind her back, but she just did what she did. And she's in a much better place for it. And she just moved along, and a lot of the people they just moved on with their lives and stuff. But they did experience it from other Filipinos, discrimination.
Yeah. So,
but just being Filipino in general, they definitely experienced it out here. Like, what's really weird? The flat that I live in is next door to my mother-in-law's house, right? And the person who used to live in this flat used to torment my wife's family. And she used to send them letters. She put things in their letters like, "I know you ate my cat," and stuff. And she would say all this racist stuff. She'd send letters to them. And yeah, it was, I mean, in England, it was it's funny because most of the white folks who used to live here, they moved away, and they moved away to an area called Essex. And so this is the east. This is northeast area, and all the whiteys basically left because all the brown folks moved in, like the Pakistanis, the Indians, the Africans, the Filipinos, the Muslims. They all moved in, and all the whiteys left and went to Essex. And when you go to Essex, you can feel it when you go there, and especially if you go to countryside. That whole me and Albert, my brother-in-law, we go to this pub. We were close to Wales. And we go to this pub, and the first thing these guys do as we go in, like, kind of under the breath, "There ain't no Chinese food here. There ain't no Chinese food here." Well, sorry, I'm not talking in a British accent, but that's what they were saying. And they were like,
really?
They shut up when me and Al like stood there and just looked at them because maybe they thought we didn't understand English or something like that, But that's like the first thing that we walk into a pub, and these guys are like speaking out loud, "Oh, there ain't no Chinese food here." And it's like, fuck you, we ain't Chinese. I said that out loud.
That's funny.
I did. So if he wanted to hear that, it's up to him.
Those are the times when
you definitely experience more of it when you go out in London, in UK. You experience more of it when you go out of London. London itself is pretty diverse, and although it's gentrifying now, just like every other major city is, you're experiencing a different type of systemic racism, with folks who are, like who are moving in to London from the countryside, and they first moved to the cool area, like where all the artists go, and then they end up selling their properties for like super expensive. Then they moved into our neighborhood. And those are the ones that are living with us. And some are cool, and some they just, you can get the subtle vibes from them. They just don't know how to react especially since there's not a lot of Filipinos around where we live, they see you, they don't know what to act. They're like, he's not black, he's not Indian. I don't know what to do with this guy. You know what I'm saying? This doesn't look like The Rock.
I think when we were there, I don't know, one of the times we were visiting and we were taking a road trip down to the Stonehenge. I think.
Oh yeah.
I think I was expecting, because I think we went to a random restaurant. I was expecting something like that. Luckily, we didn't experience that. But I was like, am I gonna? Do they see like Asians or Filipinos or colored people in this area? Didn't seem like it, but no, they're totally fine. So maybe I just luck out.
That's good. That's
things.
good. You had a good experience. It's just more like when
I was in Iceland, I was. That's the one thing I was kind of low key worried about. But I mean, besides the fact that I'd interact with an Icelander that has never met a Filipino before, I haven't really experienced anything that blatant.
The kind of things that you see more is not being included. More like it, like So
anything like
one
subtle,
of the things, it's more subtle. It's just not things like not being included. So like if you look at the census out here, there is nothing for Filipinos. Even though there's a decent size, when you're talking about all of UK or even all of London, there is Filipinos. Yet they're not included in the census. You know, you'll see like I think Chinese, Black. They have everybody else but Filipinos, and so like those are the kind of things that you see in terms of like the system out here. And the thing is, like, the only way you can be seen out here is if you kind of like, you have to speak up. You have to kind of go out there and say, hello, we exist. So like one of the things my wife did just recently, she, she's part of a women's group, an ecumenical group, international ecumenical group. And so they're a mix of different religions, and they're females who get together and talk about certain issues. And the Pakistani group, she was one of her friends is Pakistani, she was talking about how, we celebrate Pakistani Independence Day and we have the flag raised up. Don't you guys do that? And Wendy was like, huh? No, we don't. No one's ever done it. And so like she finally, because her friend has certain connections, she finally said, yeah, we can we celebrate that? And Philippine Independence Day was on the 12th. And this is like way before COVID. And so the plan was to do a special ceremony and to raise the flag up. And because of COVID, we weren't allowed to do the ceremony. And we almost kind of forgot about it. And then luckily, one of the guys over there who works in the town hall sent the message to Wendy, look, we raised the flag. And I was like, oh, that is so awesome. They still had it in the schedule book. And so they still went with it, even despite no ceremony. But they sent the video to her. And if you go on my Facebook or on my wife's Facebook, you'll see the flag raising. And that's like the first time I think my wife's family has been here since the 70s. She grew up in the 80s, but like my wife's mom and they've been here since the 70s, and I think that's the first time that it's ever been done here. I can only speak for here. Wendy reckons probably all of the UK. But it just takes that kind of movement to be heard just a little bit. And of course, luckily she had some certain connections over there. And nice. I think awesome. A lot of folks appreciated that. Yeah, it is awesome because, like I said, my wife did experience certain racist attitudes. I mean, like in the stores, I remember I think she was telling me this one story where like this older white lady was saying, because her and her sister were playing, and they told her, "Hey, get your monkeys out of here! Get your monkeys out!" And then my mother-in-law got so pissed. She said, "Don't you ever talk to my children like that?" And she just went hardcore mama on that lady. And those are the kinds of things that happened over here because even though most folks don't think about the colonial. I mean, they don't think about the racist history that they have in the UK. It's definitely evident, and yeah, it's definitely evident.
I don't think I've ever.
They had slavery over here. I mean, part of the slave trade was over here too. So a lot of the descendants are from that area, and it's just like a little bit more hush hush, a little bit. And
yeah, that's the thing.
Although,
I don't think I've heard much stories about these things in the UK. But you're right. Maybe it's
a lot of people. Yeah, what they tell me is like the first thing they always tell me, "Oh, we don't have racism here," and I'll be like, "Huh? What?" and then I'll be like, "Yeah." Then they go, "Well, we don't have racism here like you guys did in the States, like systematic segregation and stuff like that." And in my head, I'm going like, "Yeah, but you guys had freaking classism, and classism is connected to like, different ethnic populations a lot of times." And so when they tell me that stuff, it's like that just makes me think of the state of mind that some folks over here have when it comes to race, and a lot of people don't want to talk about it. And but you can see they're also doing the protests as well over here, and trying to support Black Lives Matter. Right. And so there's a big movement here as well to support not only the African Americans, the Black folks in America, but to support folks, the things that's happening over here with police brutality and whatnot.
I mean, that makes sense. I mean, I think it's relative to a lot of places around the world, so definitely a good movement, something positive for sure. Just not sure about the looting.
No, the looting part is that's what ruins it all. It's just
that's true.
I mean, it just ruins the whole movement. And the funny thing is, I think most of the people who are looting aren't even part of the protest. No, exactly. From what I've observed, a lot of the people are just like folks who just want to, I don't know, create anarchy or whatever.
Right.
And
so do you guys?
Do
you guys celebrate Filipino Independence Day in the UK, in England?
We do,
not officially. Not officially. Oh. They don't put that in the calendar or anything like that. It's just the communities will celebrate it on their own.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think it was relatively recent for us, right? To be official.
I think it was last year.
No. Not Independence Day. Filipino Independence Day has been recognized for a little while, but again, hasn't been that long. But Filipino Heritage Month.
That was last year.
Yeah, started last year and is recognized by Canada. I think even the
are they following the same?
He sent out a message this month about Filipino heritage, so that's pretty cool. That's nice. And
yeah, I think it's gonna take a lot of voicing out here in the UK before stuff like that happens. But I think it will happen over time. I mean, one of the things that we want to do is just get our name on the freaking census, man.
What do you guys think of this? Sorry, go on.
Go ahead. What do you mean? Oh no, I was just saying because I don't know if you were here when I was talking about it, but like one of the like the subtle discriminations is not even being on the census, and so like one of the things that we want to do is make sure that we get in census so that like when there are things that when there are things like grants or any things that you need, you got the data there to say, hey, there's a bunch of Filipinos here. They need to be recognized as well. And so
that
data is important.
What I was gonna say, it is very important, and I don't even think in Canada we're relegated to anything. I think it's just a visible minority or something. But what I was going to say was, and I've mentioned this before, a friend of mine, the same person that I've discussed like Igorotness with, whatever, she was like, so do you see yourself as a Filipino? And like going back again to what I was talking about earlier, about how it frustrates us when we're in our history, we're not included as a Filipino, as within the Filipino community or the Filipino pan-Filipino designation. But it also frustrates us when we are muddled into the pan-Filipino thing, but there's no actual distinction of Igorotness. So, what do you guys think of that question? Like, do you see yourself as Filipino?
Yes.
Yeah, I think
You don't see we don't see us as separate, or what is it? Yeah.
When people ask me, I say I'm Igorot Filipino, American,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But I always mention my Igorotness just because, like, I think for me that's my responsibility to let them know. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that's I have a sense of pride about that when I tell folks. And so, like, am I Filipino? Yeah, because we're part of that history and that chain. My Igorot, most definitely. And so that's me. How about you guys?
Yes.
Jay?
Yeah.
Can you
Sorry,
even hear us?
I had to feed my kid. And I have
Did
one
you hear
kid
the question?
So for myself, I identify as Filipino American of Igorot heritage, and because it's just that's the way I've come to understand it. Yes, I'm Filipino because, well, that's where we're from. But I think that when we say Filipino, man, that's a diverse group in itself. And it has a lot of layering, and I think there's an acknowledgement of that we have to say that there's so many aspects of what it means to come from the Philippines.
So then, is it okay for another Filipino to identify as an Igorot?
I think no.
Even if you come it from a very well-meaning intention, like they love Igorot, like they again romanticize Igorotness.
That's like me because I have black friends. I just want to like walk around with like a afro and and walk around with very kind of like Afrocentric clothing. It just seems like it doesn't seem quite right.
Go play with her. But no, I definitely agree with that. I do agree with that. Because and I think we touched on this last time too, right? About the cultural appropriation, basically.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, like, well, at least in my mind, all Igorots are Filipinos, but not all Filipinos are Igorot. So.
Sorry, right. I couldn't really answer that because I'm hearing other things in my headphone, and I think that with for other people to claim it is different because the identity of being a Filipino is much wider. It's a wider container. The identity of being Igorot is very specific. At least the way we've come to understand it has a very specific meaning. So when someone else wants to kind of like jump into that little container with us, I think you got to ask why. What happened to yours? Who do you know who you are? Who are you about? And those are one of those like life questions that you really got to ask people. Like, who are you? And if they're identifying as Igorot, man, how did you come to that conclusion? That just seems like, are you? That just seems odd to me that you're jumping into that little container there. So for me, I think there are people who identify as Igorot because they've had relationships. They've had certain kind of relationships with people, either intimate relationship or maybe like relationships in which they have worked with Igorot people and found a deep affinity. They were accepted somehow within the community. Like we all had like, did you always had a white friend who you loved to hang out with Filipinos? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I do. I mean, and
Our white friend is a married
yeah,
Filipino.
we'd always talk to them like, yeah, you're the honorary Filipino amongst the group. Well,
yeah.
maybe that person, found that because of found that there was an affinity there, and then there's an accepting of that. So I think it kind of depends on the context. But for someone out of the blue to say that hey, I'm Igorot and I'm adapting this culture, that just seems kind of odd to me. And I'd like to know why or how.
Yeah.
How did you get there? What's the journey? And I'd love to know the story.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The context around it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's
because then there's those. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Because there's some individuals who are not even Filipino that I would say that they're probably more Igorot than I am because a lot about the culture. They're really really immersed in it.
Uncle Patrick,
a few things for sure. Exactly. So
yeah,
that's a good point. That's a good point. It's not just the blood.
Uncle Patrick's the poster boy for that.
Hell yeah.
Totally immersed himself in the culture. Freaking learned the language, man. And
Amazing.
Even more so, he learned Buntuk, So he speaks with that accent too. And it's like, wow, okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, he lived there, and he married in, and there's a lot of that kind of context in there.
So that's the context. One of the contexts you're talking about. Right?
Yeah, it's definitely not pedestrian. He definitely immersed himself, deeply rooted.
Yeah,
it's different than that guy who rides a tuk-tuk and says he's Filipino. That white guy. And he says, I identify myself as Filipino. Have you heard about that? Like those people who identify themselves as a certain race, and then he says, "I ride a tuk-tuk," and so he goes everywhere. And tuk-tuk's, I think, Indonesian or something like that.
But Thailand,
Thailand or something. Yeah, it's just the dude. The dude claims himself to be Filipino, and I forgot what there's a name for this. People who just inside they feel like they are this race, so they just go with it. And I think we've talked about. Yeah, was it you who mentioned it last time?
That's definitely interesting.
Who
that
mentioned
wasn't me, but wow, that isn't what goes on there when
Sorry, I'm pointing at you, but then you can't see me pointing at you.
Who are you pointing at?
Exactly. I don't know who you're pointing at.
I knew it was Jay.
Gerald. I'm pointing at Gerald.
Oh.
You can't see me pointing at you?
I guess I do now.
I'm pointing at Jay.
Oh Jay.
Hey.
There you go. If you're in the same position there.
No, I think we're in different positions based on where we're at. Because Gerald.
Is that where Jay is?
That's Gerald right here for me.
This is Edel right here.
Yeah.
Gerald's up there for me.
Yeah. There's Gerald up there.
See.
All right, before we wrap this up, guys,
You're right,
I've been doing a bad job of monitoring the comments, so there's just a couple of
anybody?
Ryan's been watching us, so thanks,
Ryan!
for tuning in.
Hey!
Hey,
Ryan. That you should call them out, and again, I think we've talked about this before. It's just
is that what he said?
It's very tricky calling people out, especially on behalf of Igorots or whichever. Maybe it's better to come from one organization or something. I'm not really sure, but it's definitely
as individuals, we have the right to call someone. We have an opinion. At least in America, we have this thing called free speech. We can kind of call people out as long as it's not slander and stuff.
Sue them.
Fair enough. That's true.
I mean, we have the right of our opinion to be able to say, as long as it's nothing that's slanderous and or something that would just be completely not true. But we can have these kind of dialogues, I think.
No, you're right. You're right. That's true. If we do, I guess, call people out or whatever, I mean, I guess as long as it's in a positive manner, or at least to get it rolling into a positive aspect or something productive, not just tearing people down.
So if you are a person who identifies as Igorot and have no blood relationship connection, I'd love to hear from you. I think we would love to hear from you and just wonder what your story is. Because I think that part of it is that, honoring someone's story is definitely important. And I hope it doesn't sound like, come from a place of being critical. But I think, to me, I wonder how that journey is for that person.
True.
Yeah.
That is true. Definitely would be.
And why Igorot people? What do Igorot people personify? What to a person's becoming? That's kind of interesting to me.
No, I definitely agree. But
Yeah.
Calling them out, I don't actually know. I think this was written a while ago, so I don't know in what context he was talking about.
I think
Ryan,
I saw a comment in the very beginning.
Oh, really?
Might have been, yeah.
Sorry.
What was interesting, I think it was the last time we got together and we were asking, what governing body would we use to have that authority to be able to call someone out, right? And it was in regards to speaking out against folks who are claiming to be Igorots and dancing and stuff. And
yeah, that one's a bigger issue. I think that can't just really come from random individuals. But
yeah,
we'll see.
But if you had because we did remember in IAC, we made one of the resolutions was to ask IAC as a governing body if we identify something to support maybe educating folks who claim to be Igorot and maybe potentially misrepresenting us. And that was one of the resolutions. And I mean, on another scale, people could do that with their local B-Bucks if there were people who wanted to do it. So I'm for that. I am for that.
Agreed.
I mean, I think you could do that as an individual too. You don't have to wait for the whole organization to jump on board with it. You could just say, hey, I have a certain expertise that might be able to be helpful to you in terms of learning and sharing and dialogue. And maybe that's something again, I think we've talked about this before, something that we could offer into places that we know, or we know people who know people who might be able to be helpful in these regions.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I think there's another one here from Maxin Nakawa. I don't recognize that. But thanks for commenting anyway.
Cool, new one.
I think some Igorots born or grew up to a foreign country don't really know or are interested in their own culture. So I would say, from my experience, this really depends because it really depends on the person. You can't really say that as a blanket statement because from my experience here, it's kind of the opposite. People that I've talked to here are more interested in learning about their culture, at least now, compared to some people in the Philippines and some that have migrated here recently. Just talking to them, and that's what they've said. They haven't learned much there. I mean, some, but not as many people are pursuing it in the Philippines as opposed to overseas or abroad.
Yeah, because what's more popular out in the Philippines is K-pop.
Dang, BTS is everywhere. Wow.
My kids are into BTS. My God. Jeez.
Hey, BTS closed out Michelle and Barack Obama's graduation celebration last week. I was like, dude, they're talking Korean, and that's how they're closing off the whole 4-hour graduation ceremony. I was like, wow, that's incredible. It's BTS, but
that's awesome because in terms of being pan-Asian, being pan-Asian, I mean,
identify more Asian.
The more Asian folks can represent out there in the world, then maybe there's less stereotypes on all of us. You know what I'm saying?
No Chinese.
But in regards to that, I believe that's a blanket statement, and I usually hear that a lot from first generation folks. They tend to tend to say that about second and third generations. Like, oh, they don't want to learn. They don't want to learn. My thing on that is that I think, yes, there's an individual responsibility, but from when they're a child, I think there's a community responsibility. And so sometimes there are people who don't learn because there's not a big enough community to actually promote the culture, especially Igorot culture. But when there is a big enough community, I feel that there is a responsibility amongst all the people to help the young ones grow up to learn about their culture, whether they hate it or not, or they hate learning it or not. You know, I think that we have to think of better ways to teach things. And for me personally, one of my personal goals is, or in my mind, one of the dreams I have is that like our community can develop language classes for younger folks. You know, whether it to be learning Ilocano, Tagalog, or Kankanai, or wherever you're from. I think there should be more Filipinos doing that. More Filipino groups and communities doing that for their children instead of expecting them to just learn on their own. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. It's not necessarily the case for all folks. Now, when they get older, then they have that choice, you know. And but how much influence did they have when they were younger? I think it's a community responsibility, and just us as a community, Igorot wide, internationally. These are the issues that we're thinking about, because we're not even thinking about like just us anymore. We're thinking about our kids and their kids and their kids' kids. I mean, that's how we're gonna be able to. We have to think future generations instead of just us and the next generation. We got to think about those kind of things as a community. Yeah, that's my response to that. Because I hear that all the time, and sometimes it bugs me.
Yeah, no, I think it's a fair assumption. To be fair, up until you do interact with more people in diaspora, because from my experience, it is kind of true. It is definitely kind of true. But the more I've interacted with other people, like such as yourselves, and especially in IIC, right? Like that definitely is counteracts that statement that she made. But I do really think it's a fair assumption. Like for me, like how I was taught when I was younger is personal accountability and personal responsibility is something that should be taken to, like, it's an important thing. And for sure, I actually can agree to that third statement. But at the same time, there are people that totally disprove that. So, like, I think it's a fair assumption. But.
And I think visibility from the community is important too.
Exactly.
It's like I'll tell you, for Jay and I, we were totally like when we saw the folks from BBOC of LA doing their thing, especially when we saw younger people doing it. How much there was a lot of like, oh man, there's a lot of sense of pride that came from that, and whether a lot of those folks during that during that time period knew that they were influencing other young Igorots to want to take part of it. And I think I guess that's kind of like what you said as well, Lido. Like, from IIC, you saw the people like learning about the culture, expressing the culture around your age group, and it's like that's something that can like inspire and motivate you to want to learn more.
It's dope that you're saying. It's dope that you're saying LA people were very active and whatnot, because I've been seeing that people from LA are saying that people in San Francisco are the more active ones. So at the end of the day, like, everyone's really active. Like before, like Seattle's the super active one, and then like you can see comments about us in Vancouver being active. But like from our perspective, I guess like the grass is always greener on the other side, right? We always say we always think that y'all down south are like the ones that are really more active. So that's an interesting perspective.
It's a good energy.
Right. I think this is a good time to end this soon. been going for a while now.
Jay,
and...
were you gonna say something?
Oh yeah, sorry.
Oh yeah, were you?
Can you?
I was gonna say something. I think that with well, I think I'll save it for a bit. I'm just trying to deal with the technology. I feel like old person, and I need young children to come and teach me technology here. But my kids aren't that helpful. They just sit there and laugh. Yeah, they do. I'm like, oh gosh. What
Sounds good.
do I need that? Yeah.
So I know we definitely at least got a little bit more heated with this one. But that's what it is when you discuss things that you're definitely passionate about. So again, for anybody watching or who will watch this, if you agree or disagree or just want to comment on anything that we said, again, these are personal opinions, and it's okay if you don't agree with them. So definitely let us know, and we can start another discussion on it. So that's what
definitely thank you for the comment.
Yeah, this is definitely the reason we're doing this, is to start up conversations and get people talking. So
any other comments out there?
Those are the two, except I said hi Ryan, and Beetle said lol. So,
oh man, I should leave that thing on too.
So yeah, for anybody watching, check out our Twitter page. I will do a better job of updating on there, and yeah, check back on this Igorot World YouTube channel in the next week or so. Hopefully I'll have some clips cut from the last stream that we did, and for this one as well. So yeah, thanks everybody for watching. And before we sign off, question for you guys: would you say Filipinos are Asian or Pacific Islander?
Oh God!
Really?
I remember this question from a long time ago, and I just thought it was funny.
Oh yeah, that one can go on and on. I mean, we were having arguments about that in the 90s.
So, yeah,
yeah. The answer for me is probably both, and we're definitely part of like that whole Asian thing. You just look at us like, yeah, of course. We happen to live on an island too, which, puts us in a certain thing. And if you look at our genetics, which, when I did that ancestry.com thing, it was a couple things were very glaring at it. There's roots in northern China and roots that come from Aboriginal Taiwan, which means that's a Polynesian root in there. Plus a few things like I got Scottish and Croatian blood. And I figured out the Croatian. Someone told me that the Romans took those Croats and the Roman Empire, since it was spread out all the way to the British Isles. That's how they ended up there. So that I was wondering, where's this Croatian?
Oh, the Scots and the Croats.
Yeah. So the Croats were like when the Roman Empire took them over, their guys were brought up all the way up to the British Isles. So that's where you get this like Croatian lineage in the blood. And then we also have Mexican blood. I'm like, wow, that's pretty wild. So we have a lot of like ancestry but those are small. The big ones, the big trunks of lineage come from northern China, Mongolia, and Taiwan, and which is that Polynesian thing. So yeah, I think it's both. And Filipinos are quite diverse in their ethnic lineage. I mean, especially all those people who say that they're Spanish.
All right, what do you think?
Spanish. What do I think?
Spanish.
I think there was a statistic that said that only 4% of the Filipino population had true Spanish blood, but maybe I'm wrong.
Can you find that?
Asian or Polynesian? to end this discussion, we're Austronesian. So it's basically the bridge between Asia and Polynesia. We're right dab in the middle. We're Austronesian. End of story. But if we go into the nuance of that actual question, because people have this idea of what Asian is, and it goes back into the whole racial or racist idea of like Oriental and whatnot. But yeah, we're definitely Asian. And if we're Pacific Islander, not quite, because we don't fall into the Pacific Island chains of Polynesia, Micronesia, and all that. But we're definitely Austronesian, so we're actually quite close to that. But, I don't know. You can ask someone smarter. Mark, perfect.
So was this our last question before we go? Or was it just a question to the folks out there?
That was the last question.
Because I could definitely give my response.
Yeah.
Give it.
Yeah, the way I feel about that one, it's like I'm on the line of that we're both, but I think first you got to look at where the term Asia, like the way that we use it in the States.
Exactly.
It's different than the actual.
Because Indians aren't Asian; they're not considered Asian, right? Indians, the subcontinent.
They're
in Europe. In Europe, they are
Asian Indian. But over here they use the term Asian to describe themselves. But in America,
Exactly.
in the States,
they're not.
The term Asia was kind of a way. It was a political. It was a way to use to bring people together, like who are from Asia, Southeast Asia. It was a political way to kind of group us together as a critical mass. So they use the term Asian as a way so that we can have some sense of political power together. And so that's the history of the term Asian in the United States. And a lot of that started out from Hawaii, like when all the different Asian groups were together, like the Chinese, the Japanese, the Koreans, the Filipinos. It's like, so like on the West Coast, it started around there. And it branched out. And so the term in America is used a little bit differently than it is like here in the UK. Over here, when people say Asian, usually they're describing East Indian, right? Pakistani,
right.
Sikh. And they see themselves as the Asian because that's the term the way that they used it.
That's the context.
So it really, the context is different in different areas. But where I'm from,
good knowledge.
Where I'm from in the States, it's good to know that. That was part of the argument like we would have like in the 90s. I'm like, dude, first of all, you got to know where the way that we're using the term Asian is different in terms of location. It's more like a political statement, if anything, historically in America. So that's why I say at least for Filipino Americans, we grew up seeing ourselves as Asian. And then as a Pacific Islander, in terms of like, there's context to that too, right? Hey, we're in the Pacific Ocean.
We're an island.
You could say,
and
we're an island, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes people relate Pacific Islander to Samoan, people from Hawaii, Fiji, Tonga, right? And they automatically connect to that. So I think for me, it just depends on how you connect yourself. That I feel that Filipinos are such a mix in terms of like because of their location strategically, and the fact that most Filipinos, especially who we are, we definitely have roots towards Taiwan, and most of the Pacific Islanders come from that DNA chain from Taiwan. For me, I feel when you ask that question, yes, there is a sense of it's mixed. You can go either which way as long as you know what you're talking about. If you're gonna claim Asian, you gotta know the history behind that word for you. Yeah, if you're gonna claim Pacific Islander, you better know the history behind that word, because there are some people, especially in the States, would rather be termed Pacific Islanders because it's more mainstream and seems more cool because it brings about images of like grass skirts and Hawaiian laid back culture and brownness, and so people want to connect to that. But the other reason would be as well as they would rather be connected to a Pacific Islander in terms of data. So like when it comes to data collection, like when like Chinese, Japanese, Koreans may not have the same issues that we are dealing with in terms of education, in terms of resources, and what they're experiencing growing up. So a lot of folks have wanted to separate. This is part of the argument too. They wanted to separate more closely to Pacific Islander because in terms of gathering resources, like they'll get more. Our people would get more if they left themselves closer with the Pacific Islanders versus the Asian folks, because like the Chinese, typically this is also stereotypical. Chinese have high education. Same with the Japanese and Koreans. Like the way that they value education, and so it's not that Filipinos don't. Of course they do. But like when we're talking about the whole group of Filipinos, like especially in the 90s and the 80s, when in America, where Filipinos, the attrition rate was so bad, it wasn't the same statistically for the Japanese, the Chinese, and the Koreans. So people wanted to say, hey man, let's just as a people, let's connect to the Pacific Islanders because they have more issues that are pertaining to us versus us sticking to the term Asian. So that's where that's what I experienced with this argument. So
I like that. These are better answers than I expected. So for myself,
that's why I kind of laughed when you said it. I was like, oh boy, that's it. Because I see this sometimes. I look at the YouTube comments when people have asked that question, and people they don't even know what they're talking about, man.
Yeah, I just remember that question because from the late 90s, like people were spitting that out, and even early 2000s, and I mean, even now I don't have a great answer. I mean, your answer was fantastic, Mark, and it's a good thing to think about. But so I'll give you my answer before, which is exactly what you said, Mark. It was cooler to identify as Pacific Islander, so that's why I identified as. That's what I would have said back then. So.
Hey, they are pretty cool, aren't they?
That's funny because
but we got country music.
Me and Gerald grew up around the same. Like we're pretty much in the same age range. You just I think you were like a year older than me, right? In high school,
something like that.
2 or 3. Anyways, we were like in the same age range in high school, and my answer before when I think that question was asked was like I'd say Asian because all my friends were like Viet. They're all Viet, right? So if I didn't say Asian, I'd be Pacific. Like to me, thinking back, I think I can rationalize Pacific Islander, even though I personally think it's wrong. But I definitely would say, oh yeah, I'm Asian, of course, because I'm with my Lao and Vietnamese friends and whatnot.
Right.
So
makes sense.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Awesome.
Yeah. I mean, these are identity contingencies. These are ways for us to kind of frame out who we are in the world, and it's kind of interesting because it's very unique to who we are, how we grew up, our perspective in the world, and they do need to be honored in a way. So it also evolves. It doesn't stay the same. It's not a static thing.
No.
So and that's what one thing I've come to discover is that that whole idea of who I am, by just simply DNA, is so much broader than I thought it would be, and so let alone how I've come to see myself in the world. It's kind of there's definitely a deep kind of individual part to it that's also part of the part of the whole. So yeah, those are good questions to dance with.
For sure. Alrighty. I don't know. I don't know what topic we're gonna cover next time, but sure we'll figure it out. So again, follow our Twitter and
Any
comment,
recommendations?
right, exactly. Comment, like, subscribe. Comment that tell us whatever you're thinking, what you would like for us to talk about. Yeah, just anything. So thanks for tuning in, guys.
Smash that like button.
Thank you. Thank you.